My dad threatened to sell my grandparents' house if I didn't let my stepsister move in, but he ended the call crying. Me, 30, was halfway through my morning coffee when my phone rang. My dad's name popped up. I knew not to expect a pleasant conversation. He never called just to check in. There was always a reason, and that reason almost always involved him asking me for something. But after everything that had happened over the years, I wasn't in the mood to cater to him. Still, I answered, just to see what favor he was about to frame as an obligation. Right away, he launched in, acting like we'd already had this conversation and I was just a little slow on the uptake. He said that, since my life was well established, it was only fair that I take in my stepsister, Riza, 29. She'd been going through a rough patch, which he conveniently never defined, and needed a place to stay while she got back on her feet, which also had no established deadline. His argument was pretty straightforward. Since he'd done his duty raising me, I owed him the favor of taking care of something precious to him. That's when I put my coffee down, because I knew where this was going. I asked him why, out of everyone, I was the one who had to take Riza in. I mean, there may be other family members more than happy to do so. Apparently, he and his wife, his new wife, not my mom, were ready to retire. They had plans. Traveling, relaxing, a stress-free life. Riza, with her financial troubles and constant need for help, would just be a burden. So, naturally, that burden should fall on me. The sheer entitlement in his voice, the assumption that I would just rearrange my life for a stepsister I barely tolerated, also he could have a stress-free life, struck me as ludicrous. I told him I had a better alternative for Riza, and for all of them. Let her get a job and behave like the almost 30-year-old she was. He got annoyed, because the excuse that she can't work was because she can't work due to a recent breakup that threw her in a deep depression. A breakup? That was the rough patch? I thought that something serious had happened, or maybe something tragic had happened. Maybe she was missing both legs or something really bad had happened that prevented her from working. Normal people go to work depressed and with many more problems than hers. But no, Riza had simply exhausted the patience of another man, and now needed someone else to also exhaust his patience. And my father had decided that I was the best option. I told him no, just that, nothing more was needed. The irritation was creeping into his voice now, as he tried to reframe it like I hadn't understood. He told me I had the space, I could afford it, it wouldn't be a big deal. I told him it was a big deal to me. Bringing another person into my home, especially Riza, was a huge deal. Riza and I had never been close. She'd spent years making snide comments about me, belittling me, and, most disgustingly, trying to get overly friendly with my husband, despite knowing full well we were married. And yet I was expected to welcome her into my home, to trust her under the same roof as my husband? My father wasn't crazy, he was expected to take it on, he was insane. But my father wasn't interested in logic or fairness. It was just my inventions and no one was trying to steal anyone's husband. Then he pulled out what he thought was his trump card. He said if I wasn't going to do him this favor right now, maybe it was time to sell my childhood home. The one I was currently living in. I let him rant about it, how he'd put the house on the market, how he could use the money for his retirement, how it was his house anyway since he was the father. He had no clue. I very calmly asked him if he was sure the house was his to sell. He answered very quickly, of course it was, it's been in the family for years. It was his parents' house before it was mine, and now if you're not going to behave like a good daughter, it's my right to sell it so you learn your lesson. Because if you don't care about this family, you shouldn't care about the family house either. He didn't own the house. He never did. He thought he did, because he thought it was only natural that his parents' house would go to him, but the estate lawyer never contacted him, they contacted me. He would have saved himself some headaches if he had checked this. He even thought he was doing me a favor by letting me live in it. The house was left to me by my grandparents in their will, years ago. They had made their decision clear, he wouldn't get it. They knew what kind of man he was. They knew what he would do if given the opportunity. So they had protected me. I told him all of this. For the first time in the conversation, he didn't have much to say. And then came the rage. the realization that his threat had backfired spectacularly. That's the most satisfying thing, that someone threatens you and in a few seconds is humiliated. Other women want big houses and jewelry. I settle for a quick humiliation to my father. He didn't ask me nicely, he demanded to know why no one had told him. For someone who called to threaten me and ended up like this, the tone of his voice was out of place. I told him it wasn't my problem. He demanded to know when this had happened. I told him it didn't matter. He demanded to know why my grandparents would do such a thing. I told him we both knew the answer to that. And then he did what he always did when things didn't go his way. He started cursing, ranting, acting like he was owed something just for existing. He accused me of stealing from him, of taking his rightful inheritance, of being the worst daughter he could ask for. He even sounded like he was starting to cry on the other end of the line. I told him he could throw all the tantrums he wanted, but the facts wouldn't change, and my coffee was getting cold. The house was mine, and I had no intention of letting him and Riza use it as leverage to make their lives easier. He switched tactics, trying to sound reasonable all of a sudden. He said maybe we could work something out. Maybe Riza could stay just for a little while, maybe we could talk about compromises. I told him I had no plans to make any compromises, there was nothing in it for me. Riza wasn't moving in, and neither of them would see a dime from the house. He thought he had entered the negotiation with something that would make me obey him, and he ended up crying. He had lost, but his brain hadn't figured it out yet. So I left them alone for a moment, him and his brain, to make the connections. I hung up. After hanging up on my dad, I figured he'd stew in his anger for a while. Maybe take a few days to come up with some new angle to manipulate me into getting what he wanted. But I clearly underestimated how desperate he was. Because the next day, I woke up to a barrage of messages, not just from him, but from Riza, too. She had the audacity to message me directly, asking if she had somehow personally offended me. She said that any differences we had could be settled by talking like civilized people. She also said she knew I had never liked her, but that she hoped I was at least decent enough to help her in a time like this. And then, she let slip the real reason behind her outrage. She was embarrassed. She had told people she was moving in with me. She'd bragged about how lucky she was to have a stable, well-off stepsister to help her out. And now that I'd refused, she felt humiliated. It's not my fault you told people your stepsister loved you when she didn't. I ignored her messages, too. But just as I was settling in to enjoy my day, thinking the worst was over, my phone rang again. This time it was my dad's wife. Now, I didn't talk to her much. We weren't close, and we both preferred it that way. She had never liked me and I had never liked her. For that reason, the logical thing was to avoid each other. I answered, already bracing myself for whatever nonsense she was about to throw at me. And she didn't disappoint. She started with feigned concern, saying she was worried about the strain this was putting on the family, that she understood I had my reasons, but maybe I wasn't considering the whole picture. I asked her what picture she was referring to, and that's when it slipped out. She said that if I didn't do the right thing and take Riza in, it would make things very difficult for my father. That with his retirement plans, this whole situation was stressing him out immensely. My father was looking to relax with his retirement, but this was causing him more stress, and could trigger some illness. So I laughed at how transparent she was being, because at that point it was so obvious that this wasn't about Riza anymore. Nobody cared about Riza. Maybe Riza herself, but I didn't care about Riza. My father didn't care about Riza, and even her mother didn't care about Riza. In short, nobody wants Riza. They were pushing her on me because they wanted to get rid of her. Even they know that she is a parasite that they will not be able to get rid of, and that she will eat the little life they have left. I asked her point blank why she and my dad didn't want Riza living with them *. I wanted them to say it out loud. She hesitated for a beat before saying it wasn't about what they wanted, it was about what made sense. That since I had more space and more stability, it was simply logical that I should take her in. I told her if they were so desperate to get rid of Riza, they could find her an apartment, pay for it, and they could help her get on her feet. But she interrupted me, telling me they weren't millionaires, that they had to think about their retirement. I told her I had no interest or concern in solving their problems. That Riza wasn't a stray dog that had to be adopted, but that it seemed like she had to go out on the street if she wasn't willing to work hard for her future. And, to twist the knife a little further, I let her know that since my dad had made it so clear he'd sell the house if I didn't cooperate, I'd actually been thinking about selling it myself. She asked what I meant by that. I told her I meant exactly what I said. If my dad was so eager to cash in on the house, maybe I would. Except, instead of giving him a single cent, I would use that money to move somewhere far away, somewhere he couldn't find me or expect anything from me. She tried to backpedal, suddenly switching tactics again. She said that maybe they had been a little pushy, and surely we could work something out. I told her there was nothing to work out and then hung up. I knew my dad wouldn't let this go that easily. And I was right, because the very next day, he showed up at my house. He had a one-person entourage. When I opened the door and saw my dad there, I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was that he had brought Riza with him. She was standing slightly behind him, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally ruined her life. I didn't let them in, and they didn't offer greetings. My dad must have practiced this speech on the car ride over, because he launched right into it. He said this situation had gone on long enough, that he wasn't going to let me act so selfishly, and it was time I listened to my father. Sure, he was at his daughter's house, who is married, expecting her to take in her stepsister, and he was ordering me around like I was 12 years old. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, waiting to see what ridiculous argument he was going to throw at me this time. He said that maybe he didn't have the house to punish me with, but he would punish me by cutting me out of his life. That he, his wife, and Riza would stop speaking to me, and I would lose a part of my family. I told him that just because he decided to marry a new woman, didn't make her daughter my family or my sister. And even if she were, it wasn't like I was losing too much here. I told him she was more family to him than to me, and that as a family they should take care of each other. He wasn't acting accordingly to what he was saying. He said that they couldn't take care of her, because their retirement was more important and that for me it would just be a small inconvenience. That the whole argument was worse, that I should just let her stay for a while, and that if I had agreed everything would have been easier for both of us. I reminded him that saying your retirement is more important than a person, and calling it a small inconvenience, when she is standing behind you, is not a good idea. He told me not to try to twist things. Riza was standing behind him, a bit surprised by what my father had said. They wanted to unload her on me like a piece of old furniture, and they were being quite open about it, even in front of Riza. Riza said she didn't understand why I was making such a big deal out of this. She said I had a spare bedroom, and it wouldn't cost me anything to let her stay for a while. She even offered not to talk to my husband. I asked her how long, a while, was supposed to be. She rolled her eyes and said, until I get myself sorted out. I told her the last time I checked a calendar there wasn't a date called, until I get myself sorted out. That I needed to borrow hers to look for it. She ended up saying that eventually, she would get a job and that I didn't have to act like I was her mother. I told her that, as she rightly said, I'm not her mother, so I had no responsibility for her. And that with that lack of respect, she wasn't going to get much from me either. She asked me if it would change anything if she asked me nicely. I said no. At this point I was playing with her, but I didn't care because I was having a good time. She said it would be a very short time and that by the time I got used to her, she would be gone. I stared at her for a long moment, to give her the false impression that I was thinking about it, before asking her how it had gone last time. The question was rhetorical, because then I answered it myself. I reminded her that she had already lived with my father without paying rent, eaten his food, used his money, pooped in his bathroom, and never made an effort to be independent. I asked her why I should expect anything different from her now. What should I do? Have her here until my retirement day and then get her a new home? She kept saying that this time would be different, but she was red with shame. I asked her how, again. She had no answer. I asked her, why should I put up with a small inconvenience for a woman who flirts with my husband every chance she gets, even after she's been told not to? Which, it shouldn't have been necessary. Her face turned red. In fact, her whole body turned red. My dad stepped in before she could further embarrass herself, saying that was precisely why he didn't want to discuss the details. He said the solution was simple. Riza moves in with me, I help her out for a few months, and everything works out. I told him I wasn't interested in his version of the solution, because in that version I had to put up with all of that and on top of that live with the waste of plant work. He told me that someday, maybe not today or tomorrow, but someday, I was going to regret it. He said because this is not what good people do, and karma will someday do its job with me. I told him that karma was already doing its job with him, because it takes care of entitled people like them. It already did the day he called and used his powers through me to tell him that the house was mine, and also karma could give me the gift of revenge now to call the police, and get him a retirement behind bars. I told him he could have married a woman without children, there were plenty of them out there. He grunted and said it wasn't like that. My dad was seething by this point, clearly realizing I wasn't going to bend to his will. He said I was going to regret this, that one day, when I needed family, I would wish I'd helped Riza. I asked him if he really thought I would call him or Riza if I needed help, because I used to think about calling a serial killer in the middle of the night, when it was also storming and where I would be alone, because that was more help than him and his family, making the quote-unquote gesture with my hands. I was thinking of saying, but I closed the door and went to do other things. I don't know how long it took them to leave, but hours later, when I had to go out, they were gone. If the earth swallowed them literally I don't know, at least the lawn looked normal. So that's my story with entitled relatives. Having read so many on here, I knew I had to write mine while it was all happening in real time. After reading so many, it's weird to star in your own, but at least it keeps you prepared. This is a kind of training to prepare for the worst. Some prepare for a zombie apocalypse. I prepare for an apocalypse of entitled people. Before continuing, don't forget to subscribe. New stories every day. Update 1. I wasn't planning on doing an update, but I'm also not going to snub this gift from heaven and the opportunity to continue acting on behalf of karma. This happened 2 weeks after I slammed the door in my dad's face, and also my stepsister, who was standing there being as useless as always. It started with an unknown number, which I had a hunch could be related to my dad. It was a woman who introduced herself as a real estate agent and asked if I had a moment to talk about selling my property. For a second, I was confused. Selling my property? I hadn't listed my house. Not yet. I told her she must have the wrong number, but she hesitated before asking if I was my dad's daughter, and that's when I got it. I took a deep breath and asked her what exactly my dad had told her. She explained, with a somewhat uncomfortable tone, that he'd come into her office earlier that morning, claiming to be the owner of my house. He told her he was ready to sell, wanted it done ASAP, and only wanted serious buyers. She had started the process, but when she went to check the property records, she noticed his name wasn't on any of them. That's when she decided to call me, the actual owner. Now, it all made sense. I asked her if she'd ever dealt with entitled people before. She sighed and said, sadly, some people thought they could pull these kinds of stunts. I told her I appreciated the call and I'd handle it, but she wouldn't let me hang up because she had something else to tell me. She said if I was considering selling the house, she already had several buyers interested in such a property. Because of the neighborhood, the pictures my father showed her, and how big it was, she was sure I would get a figure between two very good ranges. I told her that I wasn't planning to sell yet, but out of curiosity, I asked her what kind of offers we could expect for such a property. When she told me the figures, I almost dropped the phone. The house had gained much more value than I had imagined. If I sold now, I could get a hefty check. My husband and I had been thinking about moving elsewhere, and this was the kind of money that allowed you to do that. Besides, showing my dad what I had gotten, while he got nothing, was an even better offer than the money. And so, in an instant, I had an idea. I told her that if my father wanted to sell the house so badly, I would be happy to sell it, just not in the way he expected. She laughed and told me she would send the documents right away. I like working with people who hate entitled people as much as I do. Something logical in the real estate sector, there must be many like that. While they believe that their house is worth more than they think, or that they want to buy good houses in good neighborhoods with little money. So my dad had just dug his own grave. A grave that was going to make me a lot of money, and with which I was going to bury him, figuratively speaking. I haven't told anyone about this sale, just my husband at first. He, of course, supported me. He's excited because he's the first one who wants to move, and everything is lining up correctly to do so. Update 2 months later, I had several serious offers lined up. The agent handled everything flawlessly, and before I knew it, I was sitting at a closing table signing the final documents. And just like that, the house was no longer mine. And the best part? I had already made arrangements to move, a bigger, newer house in a completely different city, one where neither my dad nor Riza had any ties. It was perfect. This agency was really good. It may be that the property I sold was in a prime location. Only once everything was finalized did I decide to inform my dad. I sent him a short message, letting him know that if he was so desperate to sell my house, he'd gotten what he wanted. Right after that I sent him a selfie next to a paper that said the figure for which it was sold. And that's when chaos erupted. Less than an hour later, my phone started ringing incessantly, with my father, then Riza, and then even my stepmother. So desperate and with so much to say. Each message that arrived, which was not answered, made the next one angrier and funnier. I don't understand why they are like this. It was all my father's idea. I was just fulfilling his wish, only the money was going to me. Then my father showed up at my door and he was angry, because according to him he still expected me to reconsider and not do it. He hoped that I would realize my mistake. But I thanked him, because with his foolishness of trying to put it up for sale behind my back, I had discovered how much it was worth and he pushed me to do it. I even pretended to be excited as I falsely thanked him for making it easier for me to take the first step. He said I had betrayed him, that I had stabbed him in the back, and that I had destroyed the family, his future, and everything. Riza, who'd been waiting in the car, bolted out and came storming up the walk. Looked like she was coming to hit me. But when she saw that I wasn't just backing away, but stepping forward *, she realized that if she wanted to intimidate me she should be ready to turn this physical. Which is why she stopped dead in her tracks and just started ranting furiously. While she did, I started dialing the police, and when they answered I said, "Yeah, I'm having a problem here with my father and stepsister. They're being aggressive and won't leave my property. I'm afraid they might escalate this to something worse." The dispatcher said they'd be there soon. My dad sputtered that I was making a mistake with this, before grabbing Riza and hauling her back to the car. I don't understand my father. He tells me he's going to sell the house when it all started, and when I do it for him he gets angry. Like he said, maybe my sale has some minor inconveniences for him, but only details to discuss. When I don't do what he wants he gets angry, when I do what he wants he also gets angry. Who understands him? Update 3. We're moved into our new city, our new house. Still some decorating to do, some boxes to unpack, some personal touches to give the place, but it's starting to feel like home. You know, at first it feels like a strange place, but as you make it your own it starts to feel more like your own place. Plus, it feels like a secret lair, that only a few people know about. Which is basically what it is, because my father, or anyone related to him, is completely unaware. And those who do know are forbidden to tell him. I've left my dad behind, who's had to postpone his retirement until he gets things sorted out. I was happy not to have to learn a new calendar. I'll leave that to my father. My dad has to keep working, even though he's old enough to retire. But if he wants Riza not to be homeless, he'll have to wait. Update 4. My dad has finally retired, to sleep, because it's very late in his time zone. Retirement from his job still has to wait, and at the rate we're going, it's likely to have to keep waiting. I'll tell you what happened between Riza and my dad, and then you tell me in the comments, which I'll be reading, what you think. My parents had decided to keep Riza like an abandoned puppy. They didn't seem to care, but in the end they stepped up and took care of the family. Good for them, I guess. They looked for some solutions, while Riza got back on her feet, which she didn't do in over 7 months, and they tried to balance their lives between work and enjoying life a little. So my dad used his credit cards to book a trip out of the country for 3 weeks and enjoy himself a bit. My dad was surely resigned to the fact that he wouldn't be able to retire, and this was the closest thing to enjoying his old age a little. So they left, in the middle of Riza's birthday. And Riza, like the 30-year-old adult child, who wanted to party like a 15-year-old with a party at her parents' house unsupervised, invited a lot of people. People she knew and people she didn't know so well. Among them were some thieves, who days after the party entered the house, when Riza wasn't there, and took practically everything. They may have been at the party and simply did reconnaissance work, because it looks like a well-planned heist. My dad had to cut his trip short a week early, pay to bring his return forward, and discover that they had taken practically everything. They reported it to the police, but there are no cameras or anything. After that, they forcibly put Riza on her feet, because they kicked her out of the house. Oh well, what was left of it? According to what I know, replacing everything stolen will cost about $25,000, which added to the $15,000 of their trip charged to the cards. The other $5,000 of the return tickets they had to buy at the last minute, and other damage to the property. My parents are in trouble. At this point they just traded Riza for debt. Now I don't know where Riza is living and I don't care. I just wrote an update because I know it's something I'd like to read if I were reading someone else's story. I'm glad I wasn't the one robbed, and I'm glad it was my dad.